I'm Mark Callie in Mr. Saltwater Tank, coming to you on behalf of SaltwaterAquarium.com. Just like you, the fish in your tank need to get fed, and how you feed and what you feed can make a big impact on how your tank looks and how much tank maintenance you have to do. Feeding your fish starts with what to feed them. I'll narrow down the list for you. First, you want to match your food choice to the size of the fish's mouth that you're feeding. You don't want to feed food that's larger than the fish's mouth. Now that seems simple, but a lot of people miss this fact. For the budget bill tank, smaller fish foods are what you're looking for. With that in mind, here are the food choices for saltwater fish. Flake foods. Great for freshwater fish. I'm not a fan for a saltwater tank. Why? So much of it goes uneaten, and every tank that I've ever consulted on because it had an algae issue, the owner also fed flake. Keep the flakes for your goldfish bowl. Pellets. These are pretty good. I say pretty good as they're easy to overfeed and some fish won't eat them. They are useful in an auto feeder or when you don't want to ask your spouse or tank sitter to feed the next type of food, which is frozen food. Frozen food is my go-to food for saltwater fish. High quality frozen food is very nutritious for saltwater fish, and most of the time your fish will eat it. When I feed frozen, I feed LRS Fish Frenzy or Reef Frenzy, a high quality food with lab-tested nutrition facts to back it up. This is one of the foods I feed my 448-gallon tank and all my clients' tanks. For the budget bill tank, I'd choose the Reef Frenzy Nano Blend. Reef Frenzy Nano Blend is ground finer for smaller mouth fish like are in the budget build. Mysis shrimp. Mysis shrimp come in small and large sizes and they are great to feed your saltwater fish. I've yet to find a fish that won't eat mysis shrimp. Brine shrimp. Word of caution here. First, adult brine shrimp are good for finicky feeders, and adult brine shrimp needs to be enriched with cell con to make it nutritious for your fish. Baby brine shrimp are more nutritious than adult brine, and in my experience, none of my fish have ever eaten baby brine shrimp. It's simply too small for them to pay attention to it. Baby brine can be used for pipefish and seahorses, and neither of these are appropriate for a beginner tank. What about live foods? There are some live food choices that are appropriate for a saltwater tank if you can get your hands on it. Most local fish stores don't offer live foods, and when they do, it's usually only live brine, which as you know isn't the most nutritious food for your fish. Pro tip, I use live brine shrimp to get new arrivals eating. The wiggly motion of live brine entices fish to eat, and once I've got them eating, I can transition them onto my other foods. For example, I brought in some fish today from Live Aquarium's Diver's Den. Live Aquarium offers live brine, so I added it to the box. If you're lucky and your local fish store offers live blackworms or live mysis shrimp, by all means feed it to your fish. And keep this in mind, live foods don't live very long in a bag, so it's hard to rely on going to your local fish store every time you need to feed your fish. Keep it simple, rely on frozen food as your primary food source and pellets as your secondary food source. Now that you know what to feed, how much should you feed your fish? The old advice for feeding your fish was to feed enough food that the fish can consume in 1 to 2 minutes. And in my experience, that always worked out to be way too much food, especially on a small tank like this one. Instead, feed enough that each fish gets 3 to 4 bites. Now that amount of food may be gone in 20 seconds, but as long as the fish gets 3 to 4 bites of food, you're fine. You don't need to feed any more. Overfeeding your fish is a great way to cause high nutrients in your tank. High nutrients can turn into algae issues and potentially fish death. So how do you know that you've overfed your tank? Here are some clues. Uneaten foods sitting on your sand bed. If you fed enough that the food got to and stayed on the sand bed, you've fed too much. Food getting caught in filtration. I understand some food may get to the filter, and food piled up on the filtration is no bueno. Food blowing around your tank and your fish ignoring it. Either the fish don't like the food you're feeding, or you've fed so much that they've lost interest. Worst case scenario, cloudy water. If you've caused cloudy water in your tank by overfeeding, it's time to take corrective action quickly. Here's what to do when you've overfed. First, manually remove any uneaten food. Second, do a water change, which I'll discuss in a future episode. And third, feed much less next time. You know what to feed and how much to feed. Now on to how to feed your fish. Feeding your fish, it's a contact sport. You want to maintain eye contact once you put the food in the tank to make sure that everybody's eating. And it's a good time to check out your fin friends as well. I see you, I'm watching you. If you're feeding pellets, pinch a small amount of pellets between your fingers, then submerge your fingers under the surface of the water. Then release.
pellets floating on the surface of your tank are less likely to get eaten. What about feeding pellets in an auto feeder?
Here's the thing about auto feeders. They're not very good at feeding small amounts of food like what's appropriate for the budget build. Therefore, in a small tank like this, I don't recommend it. Now, if you've got a bigger tank with larger fish, then I could see using an auto feeder.
When I feed my fish, I do not turn off any filtration or pumps. The reason is I want the food to blow around the tank so all my fish get a chance to eat it. Not every fish is going to rise up to the top of the tank to eat. If you're sticking to my guidelines on how much to feed your fish, leaving the filtration and pumps on won't be a problem. For feeding frozen food, first, break off enough food that you think your fish will eat. Here's how much I feed the 2 clownfish in the budget build. It doesn't look like much, but it's still plenty for them. Second, thaw the food in a cup of tank water for 15 minutes. And yes, we sell this shot glass over at SaltwaterAquarium.com. It's even free on orders of $100 or more. After 15 minutes, break up the food with your finger or a fork. Then dump in a little bit of food into your tank and observe. Make sure everyone is eating it and make sure the food you put in the tank is gone before you feed more. If you have any leftover thawed frozen food that you aren't going to feed that day, throw it out. Don't try to store it in the refrigerator as it can go bad, stink, and get you in trouble with your spouse.
Most saltwater aquarium hobbyists overfeed their fish, so remember, as long as your fish get 3 to 4 bites of food every time you feed, they're golden. They don't need any more. Now, if you want to do something great for your fish, take the same amount of food that you feed in 1 feeding and split it up into 2 feedings. Feed a little bit in the morning and then feed a little bit in the afternoon. And of course, remember, just because the fish swims up to the glass and looks at you, that doesn't mean that they're hungry. They're always going to do that. I'm Mark Callahan, Mr. Saltwater Tank, coming to you on behalf of SaltwaterAquarium.com. I'll catch you in the next episode. I just fed you, I'm not feeding you again.